Leslie Sloan, Blake Lively's longtime publicist, has ignited new controversy by filing a motion for attorney's fees after the court dismissed claims against her in the ongoing legal drama involving Wayfair and Justin Baldoni. Despite the judge clearly stating that attorney's fees would not be awarded, Sloan is pushing forward, seemingly in an attempt to reshape public perception and cast herself as a victim of a malicious smear campaign. Her timing is also raising eyebrows. The motion was filed just as an amended complaint was expected from Wayfair, leading many to believe this is more about controlling the narrative than securing legal compensation. In the motion, Sloan argues that the claims against her were not just legally weak but entirely fabricated, calling the original lawsuit a publicity stunt. However, critics, including legal commentators and media analysts, point out that while the judge dismissed the claims, it was due to litigation privilege, not because the allegations lacked substance. This critical distinction suggests that the dismissal was procedural rather than a vindication of Sloan's conduct. Instead of ending the controversy, Sloan's move may have opened the door to further scrutiny, especially since she's now invited renewed focus on her professional history, including her ties to Harvey Weinstein, something she strongly denies despite public records suggesting otherwise. In her motion, Leslie Sloan adamantly denies ever spreading false claims about Justin Baldoni or leaking damaging information about Blake Lively's experiences on set. She frames herself as a wrongfully accused party dragged into baseless litigation. However, the contradictions in her statements are difficult to ignore. While she insists she never told anyone that Baldoni harassed or assaulted anyone, she also argues that, even if she had made such comments, they were protected as matters of public interest. This contradictory defense raises eyebrows and casts doubt on the credibility of her claims. What adds even more complexity is Sloan's controversial connection to Harvey Weinstein. Despite her legal filings denying any professional relationship, multiple credible sources, including a Hollywood Reporter press release, state that Weinstein financially backed her PR firm, Vision PR. Additionally, she was previously quoted as Weinstein's publicist in mainstream news outlets as far back as 2016. By attempting to distance herself from these associations in court documents, Sloan opens herself up to allegations of dishonesty and revisionism. Her motion not only revives old accusations, but also threatens to backfire by drawing renewed attention to a career history that includes ties to some of the most notorious figures in Hollywood. Sloan's attempt to recover attorney's fees relies heavily on framing the original lawsuit as frivolous and malicious, alleging that the Wayfair parties filed the claims purely to damage her reputation and suppress her communications with the press. However, this legal strategy is facing significant scrutiny. The judge dismissed the claims based on litigation privilege, not because they were proven false or without merit. That distinction is critical, as it means the dismissal doesn't equate to exoneration and undermines Sloan's narrative that she was fully vindicated. Adding to the skepticism is Sloan's selective presentation of evidence. She cites a declaration from a Daily Mail reporter named James who stated that Sloan never directly accused Baldoni of misconduct. But critics argue that this declaration is being used to distort the broader issue, that Sloan may have planted or influenced stories indirectly, as she allegedly has done with other clients in the past, including Britney Spears, Lindsay Lohan, and Paris Hilton. This pattern, coupled with her own conflicting explanations, makes her current claims appear more like a reputational cleanup than a clear-cut legal defense. Instead of putting the matter to rest, Sloan's motion may have reignited deeper questions about her credibility and intentions. In her filing, Leslie Sloan attempts to shift the blame onto journalists, particularly Sarah Nathan, claiming that any information about misconduct on set came from them, not from her. According to Sloan, Sarah Nathan was the first to bring up allegations about Baldoni making Blake Lively uncomfortable, forwarding Sloan an anonymous tip and describing Baldoni's behavior as a bit creepy. Sloan insists she merely received this information and did not initiate or circulate it. However, her narrative conflicts with other evidence, including prior texts and media stories that suggest she may have played a more active role in spreading these claims behind the scenes. Further complicating her position is Sloan's long-standing reputation for using media strategically. The video points out that she has a documented history of leaking stories about her clients' enemies, especially during PR battles, whether with Britney Spears, Lindsay Lohan, or even friends of Blake Lively. Critics argue that her denials ring hollow in light of her pattern of operating behind the scenes while allowing media outlets to quote anonymous insiders. This tactic enables plausible deniability while still shaping the narrative. Sloan's current legal position hinges on the claim that she did nothing defamatory, But as her history shows, her influence in the press has rarely been straightforward or hands-off. A central problem with Leslie Sloan's defense is the number of contradictions woven throughout her motion. On one hand, she firmly states that she never told anyone that Justin Baldoni harassed or assaulted Blake Lively or anyone else. On the other, she argues that even if such statements were made, they were protected speech under matters of public interest. This contradictory reasoning weakens her credibility and makes it difficult to determine where she actually stands. Additionally, Sloan accuses the Wayfair parties of filing a baseless, defamatory lawsuit just to retaliate against her and damage her career. Yet at the same time, she says they tried to silence her from speaking to the press about the misconduct she allegedly never discussed. These conflicting claims, that she didn't say anything and also that she was punished for saying something, make her argument confusing and internally inconsistent. Observers point out that such tactics mirror classic damage control strategies: deny, deflect, and then argue privilege. But in trying to check every legal box, Sloan ends up weakening the very foundation of her case. The court may be forced to consider whether her motion is a genuine legal defense or simply a carefully constructed PR maneuver. In her attempt to recover attorneys' fees, Sloan leans heavily on New York's anti-SLAPP statute, claiming that the Wayfair lawsuit was filed to chill her free speech and punish her for speaking to the press. However, this argument is legally shaky. Federal courts in New York have already held that state anti-SLAPP provisions do not apply in federal cases, a precedent that undermines her entire basis for requesting fees under that law. Sloan seems to acknowledge this limitation, stating that if the court won't apply anti-SLAPP, she still wants attorneys' fees under the court's inherent powers. But this fallback argument is even more difficult to prove, especially since the judge didn't dismiss the case on the grounds that it was frivolous, only that it was protected by litigation privilege. In fact, the judge explicitly declined to invoke anti-SLAPP or any related statute, making it unlikely Sloan's motion will succeed. Critics argue that the use of anti-SLAPP here is more performative than practical, a way for Sloan to portray herself as the victim of a targeted smear campaign rather than someone at the center of a tangled and politically charged media storm. As with much of her motion, the strategy appears more about spinning public perception than securing a legitimate legal win. A major theme in Leslie Sloan's motion is the effort to reframe the entire lawsuit as a targeted attack fueled by lies and sensationalism. She claims the Wayfair parties recklessly alleged that she had ties to Harvey Weinstein and used those associations to smear her reputation. However, as critics point out, these reckless allegations are backed by documented evidence, including a Hollywood Reporter article confirming Weinstein backed her PR firm and previous public statements where she acted as his spokesperson. Sloan argues these references were irrelevant and inflammatory, included only to damage her credibility. But instead of addressing the substance of those connections, she dismisses them as planted stories, despite being published by credible outlets. She even goes as far as to deny that she ever worked with Weinstein, though records show she provided public relations support during pivotal moments in his legal battles and for his close associates. This attempt to distance herself from her past appears strategic, aimed at cleaning up her image rather than confronting the facts. Observers suggest that by minimizing or erasing her public record, Sloan is not just defending against defamation, but trying to rewrite the narrative altogether. In doing so, she may be underestimating both the court's scrutiny and the public's memory. Leslie Sloan's motion frames her as an unfairly targeted professional, but her long-standing reputation for strategic media manipulation tells a different story. The video outlines numerous examples where Sloan allegedly leaked damaging information about celebrities after falling out with them, including Britney Spears, Lindsay Lohan, and Paris Hilton. These leaks were often designed to benefit Sloan's remaining clients or retaliate against those who fired her. This pattern raises serious doubts about her claim that she had no role in planting stories about Justin Baldoni or Blake Lively's on-set experiences. Furthermore, her motion attempts to pin the source of these stories on journalists while simultaneously denying she had any part in spreading them. Yet her known history of operating as an anonymous insider in press articles rather than going on record as an official spokesperson has been a recurring tactic throughout her career. Critics argue that this dual role allows her to shape the media narrative while maintaining plausible deniability. Ultimately, the motion feels less like a legal defense and more like an attempt to rehabilitate a damaged public image. By ignoring her public record and past behaviors, Sloan appears to be presenting a sanitized version of events that doesn't align with the history already available in the public domain. One of the central pieces of evidence Leslie Sloan relies on is a declaration from Daily Mail reporter James, who stated that Sloan never told him Blake Lively was sexually harassed or assaulted. Sloan uses this to argue that the Wayfair parties falsely claimed she spread defamatory information. However, the video highlights that this evidence doesn't tell the whole story. James never testified under oath, he only signed a declaration, and the amended complaint from Wayfair never claimed that Sloan made direct accusations. Instead, it focused on her indirect role in spreading damaging narratives through the media. The confusion deepens when considering the conflicting claims between what was allegedly said, what was reported, and what was filed in court. Sloan says she was never the source, yet communications show she engaged with journalists who later published stories aligned with the allegations. She also accuses Wayfair's attorney, Brian Friedman, of mischaracterizing what James said, pointing out that the amended complaint selectively included text messages while omitting others that might have cleared her name. Critics argue that Sloan's strategy is to cherry-pick information to support her defense, while ignoring the broader context of how the media narrative was shaped. By focusing only on fragments of communication and avoiding the core issue, her involvement in influencing press coverage, Sloan risks undermining her own credibility in front of both the court and the public. In the final stretch of her motion, Leslie Sloan zeroes in on the claim that the entire case against her revolved around stories in the Daily Mail and Page 6, portraying herself as a scapegoat unfairly dragged into a media scandal. However, this assertion misses a key detail. The bulk of Wayfair's amended complaint centered on Sloan's involvement with the New York Times, not just tabloid leaks. Sloan barely addresses this core element of the lawsuit, choosing instead to focus on arguments that are easier to dispute, like anonymous tips and secondhand journalist quotes. What's more, Sloan tries to discredit the Wayfair lawsuit by claiming that no amended complaint was ever filed with the additional proof they promised, suggesting they had no real evidence against her. But as the video explains, the lawsuit wasn't dismissed on its merits. It was thrown out due to protections like litigation and reporter's privilege, meaning the claims weren't necessarily disproven. They were simply barred from proceeding under those specific legal standards. By emphasizing procedural dismissals and ignoring the broader accusations about her past conduct and media manipulation, Sloan appears more focused on controlling her public image than winning a legal argument. Her denial of working with Harvey Weinstein, despite publicly available records, along with her pattern of planting stories for former clients, casts serious doubt on the sincerity of her motion. Rather than provide clarity, her filing raises more questions about her role behind the scenes and whether she's truly been vindicated or simply protected by legal technicalities.